Some cities are not defeated first by the enemy outside the walls. They are defeated first by the hope inside them. Troy had endured 10 years of war. Outside its walls, the Greek ships, fires, voices and banners had become a season that refused to end. Inside the city, people learned how to live under siege. Some watched from the towers, some traded rumors quietly, and some asked the same question every night. If the gods still favored Troy, why did every dawn bring fear again? Then, one day, the Greek camp was empty. On the shore lay only cold ash, abandoned tools, and a giant wooden horse. It stood in silence, tall as a shrine dragged to the edge of the city. Trojans came out from behind the gates, some cheering, some doubting, some crying that the war was finally over. 10 years of siege, 10 years of death, hunger, and waiting seemed to become the past in one moment. But the horse was not an answer. The horse was a question. Some said it should be burned. Some said it should be cast into the sea. Some called it a sacred offering to Athena and said it should not be offended. In the argument, a Greek man was brought forward. His name was Sinon. His clothes were ragged, his voice broken, like a sacrifice abandoned by his own side. Sinon said the Greeks had abandoned the war. They had offended what was sacred and used this horse to calm Athena's anger. He said the horse was so large because the Greeks feared the Trojans might drag it into the city. If it entered Troy, he claimed, Athena's protection would turn toward this city. The lie struck not the gate first, but the most exhausted part of Troy. They wanted to believe the war had ended, wanted the silence to be read as victory, and wanted what the enemy left behind to become a gift from the gods. Laocoon did not believe. He warned the city not to trust a Greek gift. Even if it looked holy, even if it stood motionless outside the wall, it could still be an enemy design. His final clear warning faced the whole city. But warning did not become direction. An omen appeared by the sea, and Laocoon could not finish his words. Trojans did not read it as deepening danger. Instead, they read it as punishment for doubters. Cassandra also knew disaster was near. Her words were often heard, yet never believed. She saw the horse as an entrance to night and asked those at the gate to hold back. So the gates were widened, ropes were tied to the horse and chants, torches and cheers pushed it through the streets. The Trojans pulled it through the gate and into the spaces between temples and homes. Children looked up at it. Elders wept before it. Soldiers gradually lowered their guard, hands on weapons moving with the crowd. Night came, and Troy slept. Feasting, exhaustion, and illusions of victory quieted the streets. Far out at sea the Greek fleet had not truly gone. It waited in darkness for a signal. Inside the city, the horse was not empty. It held what Troy least wanted to admit: the enemy had never truly gone. That night, the horse was opened. Greek warriors entered the sleeping city. The gates were opened from within, and the ships returned to shore. Troy thought it had reached peace, yet in its least guarded hour it met collapse. Aeneas saw Hector in a dream. The hero who once guarded Troy no longer brought a promise of victory but a command to flee. Troy could no longer be preserved by the sword. Only household gods, family, memory, and future could remain. When Aeneas woke, the city was cut open by firelight and shouting. Streets were no longer familiar, each door could hide loss. His first response was not escape but return to the fight. He gathered his people and moved through the chaos, trying to give his last courage to a city already broken. Courage could not repair error. Loyalty could not pull the horse back outside. Once a city is opened from within, even the highest walls become shadows after the fire. The palace became the final centre. There, once home to Troy's authority, bloodline, and ritual life, remained only the sound of an age closing. King Priam, old and spent, stood before the altar facing what could no longer be undone. The palace collapsed. The old king fell at the altar, and the past of Troy had no place to return to. Aeneas still wanted to stay. Yet another command became clearer: not every loyalty is holding ground. Sometimes loyalty is carrying the remaining embers out. He returned home. Anchises first refused to leave, For to leave Troy meant the old man confessing a life rooted and uprooted at once. But an omen appeared in the home, and Ascanius's future came into view. Aeneas finally understood he could not remain only a warrior. He had to become the bearer of a fallen city. So he lifted his father, held his son by the hand, and carried their household gods into the night. In the chaos, Creusa was lost. Aeneas turned back looking for her until her voice returned like fate, telling him not to give himself again to the city already burned. His road would not stop at Troy's ruins. Farther west, another shore, another harbour, and another continuation waited. Before dawn, Aeneas left with the survivors. The horse still stood in a corner of the city, like a giant empty shell. The first group of survivors passed through familiar streets to the harbour, checking again who could still walk together. Aeneas held the household gods, watching elders and children through the corners of the city. A harbour signal rose over the water, and the offshore fleet returned to shore. Dawn touched the opened gate and the horse's emptied belly. Aeneas did not return to the palace. He walked toward the shore with the household gods, elders, children, and the name of a lost home. When a society mistakes danger for relief, the first opening is not only the gate but the judgment that once guarded it. This is the cost of exhaustion turning into urgency, when the body of a city chooses comfort 1 hour too early. Troy was not undone by one outside blow against the wall. It opened the gate from within when relief was mistaken for safety. For narrative continuity, this episode uses Virgil's Aeneid Book 2 as its main structure, with its Roman, Aeneas-centered framing of Troy's fall. The wooden horse and the sack of Troy have earlier traces in Odyssey Books 8 and 11 and in summaries of the epic cycle, but much of that earlier Greek epic material survives only indirectly or in summary. Quintus Smyrnius' Pestomachia and Pseudo-Apollodorus' Epitome may support sequence, checks and supplementary details. This episode does not treat the Iliad as the source for the wooden horse or the sack of Troy, because the Iliad ends before those events. Related material boundary the story can connect to the Trojan Horse, the warnings of Laocoon and Cassandra, and the Aeneas exile tradition. The source boundary remains separate to the horse, and the sack of Troy should not be pushed back into the Iliad as its main body. Thank you for watching this story of the Trojan Horse and the fall of Troy.